Welcome to our today's ILEA forum powered by Giants Enterprises. Welcome, get settled. We're going to start in just a couple minutes once we've got all the attendees on the line. If you are settled, would love to have you drop into the chat, which is a button along the bottom of your Zoom window. Let us know where you're dialing in from today. Would love to see where across the world we've got owners and managers and leaders dialing in today. We made it to middle of the week, you guys. Another week down. We're well into fall, which is always a nice feeling here in Calgary, Alberta, where I'm dialing in from. Allin and Tom, I'm going to introduce you guys in a second, but thanks for being here. And Alexandra, as always, thanks for getting us started here. Get yourself settled, grab your coffee, grab a tea. You might be having lunch if you're in Central Time Zone, or a late lunch if you're in the East, but get yourself settled and we'll get started in just a minute here. And I was saying to Allin earlier when we were getting energized and ready for the call that I always love an intimate group, especially of owners. I'm hoping and I know that this will be a super impactful conversation. And honestly, the more access all of you have to business coaching and analysis, the better. So thank you for putting yourselves in the driver's seat of this new world we're living in. Glad to see all of you here today. I'm seeing some friends from California. I hope everyone is safe. I can't imagine what you're going through. Certainly see it on the news, but we're thinking of you guys every day. So thanks for choosing to be here today. All right, well, we'll let the last few people get settled, but why don't we get started? So welcome again to our conversation today with Allin and Tom, who I'll introduce in a second. My name is Lisa Marks. I'm one of your ILEA International Board of Governors. We're so glad that you're here. It's been a few weeks since our last webinar, but the wheels are very much in motion for another webinar next week and some really powerful conversations in October. So stay tuned about that. Also on the line, as I mentioned, Allin and Tom, who we'll introduce in a second, but on behalf of the organization, thank you both for being here and for all of the energy you put into this conversation. On behalf of the entire ILEA leadership team and all of our chapters globally, I want to say a huge thank you to all of our members. This association is nothing without you. You've chosen to be a part of an organization that cares about community, professional development, on-demand education, and you see ILEA as an essential part of your professional toolkit. Without you guys, we can't put on content like this, so thank you so much for all that you do and for being here. If you're not an ILEA member yet, that's okay. We welcome you here as always. If you do believe in community and education and professional development now more than ever, I invite you to check out ILEAHub.com, find your local chapter, and reach out. We'd love to hear from you and have you be a part of this community officially. Huge thanks to our partners and friends at Giants Enterprises for sponsoring our industry conversations here, just like today. This partnership really has enabled us to do even more conversations online with all of you, rich content, relevant, and hopefully super useful. So big thanks to Giants. A little bit about Giants here today. So Giants Enterprises is dedicated to the curation and development of new ventures complementary to the San Francisco Giants franchise by delivering larger than life experiences to millions at Oracle Park and beyond. Hopefully one day soon they get to do that again. Giants Enterprises creates memorable events, abundant with excitement and engagement, both virtually and in person, for their varied partners as well as local and international visitors. Again, hopefully one day soon. Positioned at the intersection of sports, entertainment, meetings, events, tourism, and hospitality, Giants Enterprises provides the rare combination of people, experiences, and platforms necessary to create giant impressions. Huge thanks to our friends at Giants. We couldn't do this without you. Before we get into a conversation about logistics for Zoom, let's just jump ahead and talk about what's coming up next week. We hope you'll join us for our next ILEA Forum conversation. We are getting on the line with our friends, the hosts of the industry-leading podcast Event Brew. So we've got the Brew crew on the line at noon Central next week, Tuesday. Registration opens tomorrow morning. Watch your inboxes. You recognize probably these faces. Certainly, we all know and love Dustin Westling, one of our ILEA International Executive Committee members, and Will, Nick, and Tui are longtime friends of the organization. So check that out. We hope you'll come and join us. We want to talk about what all we've been through in the last 6 months and what we've learned. This is a well-researched, always-on group of people. So come join us for a lighthearted and fun conversation. Okay, so you're probably well-versed in Zoom, but I always like to run through these notes so that you can once again make sure you get best use out of this conversation. So at the bottom, you're already using it. I'm so glad. Chat box is a great spot for sharing thoughts and comments from the audience. You can talk amongst yourselves. That's a great spot for lighter banter. But if you have questions for Tom or Allin, which I know you will, because you get front of the line access to a business coach today, drop your questions into the Q&A. So that's another button at the bottom of your Zoom tab at the bottom. Open that up and drop in questions. So this is a place to drop in clear, succinct, and precise questions that you want answered by Allin or Tom. And we will be moderating that field for questions that you want answered. So make sure you differentiate between the two. If you see a question in the Q&A that you want answered as well, you don't have to ask it twice. Just hit the like button to promote it up to the top, and we'll watch for those as well. In today's conversation, we've got a poll or two coming at you, so watch for the pop-up window and just select your answer and hit submit. It's that easy, but we haven't used that feature before here in ILEA, so wanted to just share that that's coming in for you today. We are recording this session, as you probably can see, so as always, we will be sharing this content for the community at large on ILEAHub.com. Check out the resiliency and recovery page in a day or two, and this conversation will be uploaded. Rock and roll. That's it for me. It is my pleasure to be introducing longtime ILEA friend and industry professional and advocate, Allin Foulkrod CSEP, who will also then kick off the conversation to introduce our new friend and longtime industry leader and business coach, Tom Stimson. So the goals for today's conversation really were profound but simple. We wanted to give business owners and members of our community access to strategic and useful conversations about how you make these big meaty decisions around staying in this business you currently have. Is it viable? How do you analyze that? And then work towards the decision that we might all ultimately have to make. So oftentimes we hear, you know, we're alone in this, each of us individually, but we're actually not. This is where you come to put yourself in the driver's seat in the situation that we've all found ourselves in, and pull on the decades of experience that these gentlemen bring to the table. So it's my pleasure to pass the reins of this call over to our longtime friend, Allin, who will then introduce Tom and get us going. So Allin has 31 years of experience in this industry. 31, I'm outing you, but you gave me that number. So something to be super proud
Gracious.
of, certainly a wealth of knowledge. Allin and his team also just won a month ago an ILEA Esprit Award for outstanding technical achievement. So kudos to you, and I watched the show and I was really excited to see your name. Allin is known as an industry expert, a small business consultant, and a coach. He is himself a business owner, and Allin, a couple of years ago, led our ILEA Global Event Forum with David Merrill in Denver, I believe it was. I had the privilege of being in the room with you. I know you can move a conversation around and really and hit some goals and results. So it's a powerful skill set you have. It's my pleasure to turn it over to you, Allin. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. It is great to be with everybody today. I think this is the right time to have real conversations, thinking about what 2021 is going to be like. And I'm especially excited to introduce the guest in just a moment that we've brought to be a part of it. He has coached me personally for many, many years and just had been advisor to our company. So we're going to have real conversations. We're going to dive into some tough topics. We're going to take your questions in such a way that we hope really contributes to your business. I think this is the time to be thinking about what's next and not so much what's behind us. Now, what's behind us was really difficult. If you think about it, hundreds and 200,000 lives were lost in the US alone, just as of this past week over the COVID period. And that's super heartfelt, and we're so sad to know about that. And yet we recognize that there's millions of more lives that were impacted by the disease known as COVID. And so the 6 months that we've been a part of has been tough. I've got 31 years in the business, never expected coming. I've even got my second grandson who is just about to hit 11 months old, and literally over half of his life has been during this period. And then we think about the brothers and sisters that serve in the industry that we do. Can you imagine that 77% of them now have lost 100% of their income? That means 3 out of the 4 people that we worked with just a year ago are either on unemployment, hoping to get back on unemployment, or really, really struggling. So we recognize all of that as a challenge, and that we wanted to have a conversation today, as Lisa set it up, about what's really going on in our industry. How can we help you in your business as you're struggling with things? So I want to start off with a poll just to poke it in the eye and get started. As you think, let's go ahead and put the poll up now if we can. As we think about 2021 and you're wondering, what are you going to be doing? Would you take this poll with us? Do you think you're going to still be running your event business in 2021? Do you think you're going to be looking for another job? Now, it may be inside of our industry, or it may be outside of our industry, but you're just processing through, I'm probably looking for another job. Will you be thinking about starting a new company? Maybe this is the excuse for you to start something new and something fresh. That would be the third option. And the fourth one is you're sitting here trying to decide. You're maybe watching things happen and you're just not sure about 2021. So let's take our poll here, and we'll bring up the results in just a little while. So still running your event business right now is at about 61%. Looking for another job is 20%. I think that's okay. We're going to talk about that too. Starting a new company, really, really smaller, just about 5% right now. In trying to decide, 20%. And I just applaud all of you. And I hope that today we really benefit, no matter where you are, that you see really positive effects. So whether you're a small business owner or a big business owner, you've got to be thinking some questions to yourself. Can you even make it? How much longer can you make it? Can you take it any longer? Is this worth it? What you've gone through over the next 6 months? Is there help on the way? In the US, it could be another PPP. Canada and other territories and countries, there's different things going on. Heck, can Allea do to help? Should I continue to hibernating? These are all the questions that I hear when I talk to people. And we want you to know, first and foremost, you're not alone in this struggle. That we are Allea strong and we're willing to have difficult conversations. And we want you to remember this is a journey in your life, but we're not identified by the business we do. And wherever you are in your journey, we recognize you've got your own story. And as you think about the go or no-go decision, you're trying to figure out who can help. I hope that our guest will be helpful in that. I hope that I'll be helpful in that conversation. I hope that we're going to find ourselves in a situation where you're asking the difficult questions. You may agree with some of what we come up with, and you may disagree, and that's perfectly fine. This is not an easy path for any of us. We're just looking for the best journey forward. Let me give you a question to be thinking out through the entire time that we have together. What's the most important decision for you to make right now? What's the thing that you and where you are in your business you need to be thinking about and searching for an answer? And again, just put it in the question. We'll try to help you tackle that or come alongside of you. So my guest today is a fantastic guy. He's an authority on business and strategy from small to medium-sized business. He's an expert in project-based selling. He's got an innovative business solution as a thought leader that he comes to us with. Since 2006, which is about the time, Tom, I think you and I met, he has coached hundreds of companies on business strategies, process, marketing, sales. He's got his MBA, and he's also a certified technology specialist. You know the saying, it's not good to ever listen to a coach that doesn't have a coach, and Tom has been a coach to many of us over the many years. And so he's been with me and a part of my life for many years. So let's just welcome live and in person, Tom Stimson. Tom, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Well, you deserve it. I know that back in, was it March or April, you started up a series that I attended, the first one you did, and it really changed how I did business. Could you share with our friends a little bit about the series that you've been doing for the last handful of months?
Yeah, you know, it's all a little bit vague, but on March 18th, to be specific, we had our first in a webinar series, and part of my marketing profile is I do monthly webinars to introduce myself and develop new business. And I had a year's worth of webinars already planned and in the can and with my marketing team. And the COVID crisis started to unfold. And I was probably second week of February, the phone calls started coming in. And as we got closer and closer to the webinar, I realized that my webinar topic, and in fact, every webinar topic I had for the next year was useless, that I had to quickly pivot and put something else in its place. And what are the questions that people are asking? What are the questions people are asking? So I looked at my notes, paid attention to every phone call and email I was getting. And I said, there's a bunch of stuff people just have no idea how to do. And number one, they don't know how to interpret the news about what a pandemic, potential pandemic at that time would actually mean to their business. They had no idea how to put their business on pause or respond to a crisis of any length. And none of them had any cash to flow them through this. Everybody was living hand to mouth. And the number one question I was getting was, what do I do with the deposit that my client wants back for their canceled event? So that's where we started. And that became a weekly webinar for 20 weeks with, we started with probably 150, 200 people showed up at the first one. By the end of it, we had 1,500 people registered for our webinars. So it was quite the experience. And every week it was like, what's the next thing that people need to know? And I put together that webinar for them, answer questions. We did it for an hour and a half every week for 20 weeks. It was exhausting, but my goodness, it was rewarding, and it was a way for me to help people who are in crisis. And that's how it all started.
Well, I tell you what, on behalf of one of the many people that sat on that workshop and that webinar, Tom, thank you for caring about our industry. Thanks for making it available for free. I mean, during a time like that, when we're all trying to assess the millions and millions of dollars that have been lost by individual companies and the billions as an industry, you being willing to be a voice and a voice of confidence and helping to set direction, talk about real things was valuable. What was the most interesting thing that you got out of that entire series? What was the thing that Tom Stimson learned?
Well, the thing that I learned is I can't underestimate the value of what I know. I take what I know for granted. I tend to be a little self-effacing about the knowledge that I share, but I soon came to realize that even the things that I thought were just fundamentally simple were extremely valuable to people because they're so focused on working in their business. They don't really have the experience of, what did we do after 9/11? How did we deal with that? How do you deal with cancellations? How do you deal with converting a client into a future event or a postponing? How do you run your business? How do you furlough people? Nobody had the answers to these things. And to me, they were self-evident. So that's what surprised me the most, is that I had to provide a granular level of detail, unlike I've ever had to do in my consulting career, about how to handle specific problems.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us through this period of time have learned more than we ever could have imagined. So let's figure out who's in our audience today with us, Tom. Let's see the poll results. If we could bring those up, that'd be fantastic. And let's see what we've got. Who is our group? So we have got 63%. So 3 out of 5 will still be running their event business. That's fantastic. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the strategies. 17% are going to be looking for another job, and it's got to be challenging to believe in an industry that no one gets into accidentally, because you've got to be passionate about events to be in the event business. And we recognize now that 17% of our audience today is going to be leaving. 5% starting a new business. So that'd be really interesting. If you specifically have got a question about your new business, if it's related to the event industry, or Tom and I can help, go ahead and throw us a question. I can see questions coming in already. That's great. That makes us more relevant, more important to you. And 1 out of 5, Tom, are trying to decide what's next. So that's who we've got out there. That's who's joining us. And so when we think about people looking for a new job or leaving the business, let's dive into that. Tom, who do you think is going to be leaving the event business? Who are the folks, or maybe what percentage is a better question, do you think will close just as a result of what we've gone through?
Well, I think, looking for another job, so many of us are solo entrepreneurs. So we're not really leaving a business, we're going to go get a job. And I bet a lot of these folks are going to be getting jobs in either complementary or the same industry. So there's a difference between working for yourself and working for somebody else, or, folks like me say becoming a W-2 person or somebody else's W-2 person. So I don't think we're actually losing those people. I think we're saying, it's not, we don't have the time and resources and endurance to continue on our own, and that's okay. It's completely understood, and I'm surprised it's not a higher number.
Yeah.
So, and I encourage you folks, don't discount. You may be going into another industry and think that your experience in doing events doesn't transfer, but I tell you what, it does, because people who think on their feet and solve problems on the fly are actually pretty rare in most industries. So I think your talents will do well wherever you go.
Yeah, Tom, what percentage do you think, if we look at all of the event businesses that are on with us today and also that just exist, what percentage do you think are really at risk of closing between now and say the end of this calendar year?
Well, let's break it into, and there's really three categories of business that we're talking about here. There are the folks that are really freelancers. We're freelancers and we have a company name. There are solo entrepreneurs, which is what I consider myself. I have limited amount of infrastructure. And there are the brick and mortar people who actually have assets that they're managing. They have a balance sheet. And we probably aren't going to lose a lot of balance sheet companies between now and the end of the year, though we will lose a few. We've got owners at retirement age that aren't ready to go another round. They can liquidate. Once they liquidate, they're debt free, they can move on. So we'll see a small percentage of those. I think the folks in the middle, I think, the 15 to 20% of people choosing to put their business on pause while they go find another means of gainful, put groceries on the table and they find another way to do that for as long as that takes, they'll probably be back. The independents, the freelance world, there's other ways to freelance and they will typically continue to do that.
Right.
So,
what do you think, if there was an indicator for someone that was typical of those that are going to what's next, what would be some of the indicators that you would be looking at in terms of decisions for those owners that are thinking about, I may need to get out? What would be some things that you could validate if you're at this place in your career, or your company's in this situation, you should be thinking either a way to solve those issues, or you understand why they may be deciding to jump out of this?
One of the things I did at the beginning of the webinar series back in March was offer free advisory calls, a quick coaching call to help people work through the issues that they were faced with right now, the big decisions they were making. And there's basically three questions I asked them, because a lot of people started off, even in March, were saying, do I need to file for bankruptcy? I see no way out of this. If we can't do work for 6 weeks, because that's all people actually thought this was going to last, I'm not going to make it. I've got to fold. That's before they had learned about forbearance and renegotiating loans and all the other things you can do to sustain your cash flow. And I said, and I would ask them, so what else would you do? And 90% of them didn't have any answer at all. And a few would say, well, maybe I'd retire, or I have another business already on the side. So this gets in your blood. So is it still in your blood? No. Move on. If it's in your blood, okay, we move to the next question.
Yeah.
Do you understand your cash flow? Okay. And then the third question is, are you creative? So if you're a binary person, everything's black and white, and you can't picture yourself doing business any other way than you're doing it now, that's a good indication that it's time to go do something else. Yeah. Because we're not getting through this without creativity. Everybody who's on this call right now has endured 6 months of creative thinking, and they're still here. So it's in your blood. If you're creative, if you can manage cash, there's a future for us.
Yeah, I think that concept of you've lost your passion for what you do, you can go be passionate somewhere else. There's some place that the skills that we've created or developed through our time here can be useful in lots of different industries. Tom, one of the questions that's come in here is, how far should we go in debt to keep our company running while we wait for the industry to turn around? How would you answer that question, Tom?
All right. So how much should I reinvest in my business to keep it going? And that is the right question, but it's a very deep, multi-layered question. But it starts with, what is your cash flow runway right now? And what have you done to extend it? So before you look at investing more into your business, have you actually done everything you can do to reduce your monthly overhead costs and extend your cash flow runway as far into the future as possible? Most people, if you think you've optimized it, you have to do it at least 2 more times.
Yeah.
So and you and I have had this conversation. I got my overhead down from 350 to 150 every month. That's great. How do you get it to 50? Okay. Yeah. It can be lower. You haven't made choices that you're not comfortable with yet. You've got to be making a lot of really uncomfortable choices to get that cash flow down. And then it is, what is your opportunity? Are you pivoting into something that will sustain you going forward? Or, and here's the big one, are you waiting for things to get back to normal? If you're waiting for things to get back to normal, do not invest another penny in your company. You're kidding yourself. I'm just going to draw a line in the sand there right now. Okay. Getting back to normal is not going to happen anywhere close to the conversation that we're having now. Yeah. So that is not a business plan. Are you doing something that is going to sustain you going forward? If we never go back to normal, are you still going to have a business? If the answer is yes, invest in it now. Gain market share, grow faster, move faster, because you've made a decision.
Yeah, I think one of the indicators also is if your revenue has been going down, and there is nothing that you're doing to change that downward spike. Exactly. Because as you said, you're waiting for the industry to fix itself. I think that would be a good indicator. I wonder if people should just graph. I mean, we like to say that data never lies, but you got to make sure you ask the right question. So if you pull up the data and you do a graph of your income and it's going down, or it hits 0 and then it continues to be 0, and there's nothing that you've done to change that, take a look at that diagram and then just continue that trend line out easily another 6 months into 2021. And that may be an indicator for you that it's time to go find a different career. Or if it's gone down, like all of us experience, loss of millions really quickly between March and April, but then you found yourself doing virtual events, or you found yourself serving in different capacities from a catering standpoint, going to personal deliveries, those kind of things. If you've seen it, continue to climb, look at that. And if that continues out over 6 months to a year, that's a great indicator that you've got cash flow. Because I think, and Tom, tell me if I'm wrong, is cash king right now?
Well, cash is always king, but right now it's the tool that we need to last longer. So cash right now is the end game. So yes, cash is king.
Yeah. I think, I hope we answered your question that came in across there. We've got another one that is around the concept of, will my company make it? I've been in business for 28 years. So we've talked about they should take a look at their cash flow. We've talked about they should take a look at their passion. Tom, what's another thing that our friends should ask themselves? Because we're asking the right questions so that they can help find their answers for their individual business.
Right. So what's at here is, have you made your pivot? Okay. So what is a pivot? A pivot is when I change what I'm doing to something else. It's a strategic move. So let me explain what strategy is. And this is very simple. Strategy is the process of designing what you want to happen based on what you think will happen. So if you think our industry is, as we know it or used to know it, is going to be dormant for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that's what you think will happen. What do you want to happen? Well, I want to survive. Are you designing the things that allow your business to thrive in that environment? Are you pivoting to something that's different than you did before that you can make money on and run your business? So think strategically, make a strategic choice. Every business can survive. There are things our industry needs. As I tell everybody, You need to attend every kind of an event that you can online. You need to watch everything that happens on television. You need to watch the Emmys. You need to watch the political conventions. Go back and watch those events occurring online and tell me those people could not have benefited from something that you know. Because
what are some?
they're
Yeah,
a
let's talk about those
nightmare right
roles.
now. Huh?
Yeah, let's talk about those roles. What and I love that you brought that up. Whether you're blue or red is irrelevant.
Yeah.
We had lots of team conversations where I was, what did you think of last night's? It didn't matter the politics of what was the virtual event like, what went really well, and what were some of the struggles. So Tom, let's just tease out for a second that one example, because so much of the AV, the production side, has gone to virtual, but it really involves a lot more than just cameras and switchers and video processing. Could you talk about the different roles in just that one example that you would see that would attract people to look at this new economy?
If you're gonna support somebody, if you're gonna be the lead contractor in supporting a streaming event, if we were, this is just a Zoom webinar, and this is like this is like my webinars. Our production values are minimal here because we're just doing Zoom. Alan combed his hair, I lit my background. Great. However, for a high-paying audience, for television, for an award show, a fundraiser, this isn't going to cut it. What can we do to contribute to that? And it's a different set of roles than what we used to have. We can be an event planner, you have a meeting planner, or somebody in charge of an event, but we have a different event going on. There's the event where I am as a presenter. There's an event where Alan is as a presenter. There may be a studio with another event, but then there's also the event that all of you are attending, which is virtual and online. And each of those events needs a designer, maybe minimal, but you need a designer, you need a producer, you need floor managers, project managers, you need to make sure that it all goes smoothly, and you need somebody overlooking all of this to make sure that our timing is good, that our audience is going to be engaged, and that the meeting actually accomplishes its goals. The worst thing you can do is take your in-person agenda and say, okay, now we're going to do it online. And I'm dealing with a client right now who's hired me to be a speaker. They have a 5-day sales training event where their original agenda had 5 hours a day of sales training, and they're moving 100% of it online. And
wow.
And I'm just talent, right? I'm going, okay, I can't do a 3-hour workshop for you online. This is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So here's how we break things into chunks. So there's a lot of roles here, and your company or you has a place to fit in some part of that, either as a B2B support or as creative support or as overall management of the event and the experience.
Yeah, and there's folks listening, I know, that work or report to someone else. I was on with one of my favorite clients probably a month ago, and I said, do me a favor, because you can kind of listen to the tone of voice. I said, would you write out in a sentence, what is your greatest fear? And I said, and I'm going to write out in a sentence, what is your greatest fear? And let's compare the two of them. And the client, my dear friend, shared where they were at. And I said, I wrote down, I'm afraid I'm going to be fired because they're going to find out I don't know how to do virtual events. And then we just had a chance to dive into this very conversation. How are you at understanding your audience? Absolute expert. How are you at understanding timing and flow and traffic management of content? Well, great. How are you at leading a team? Fantastic. So what you don't know how to do is how to do a virtual event. But could I offer that a virtual event is like tires on a car? You're not going to worry about your tires until something goes flat. It certainly is not where you begin the conversation on what car do I want to drive. You look at so many other factors, and that is something you can outsource. And another area, when you talk about the multiple days that you just alluded to, Tom, is one of our friends is asking a question right now. We are in the entertainment industry. We book live entertainment. How are we going to make it? How do entertainment people make it in the current economy and the current needs that our industry is facing? Well, how would you answer that? Because you and I just had this conversation.
Well, we did, and I think
entertainment
bookers and recommenders and people who do talent acquisition need to pay attention, because very few people are professional presenters, and even fewer are good at it doing online. And I know a lot of professional presenters because of what I do, and most of them are terrified of online. They don't know how to talk to when there's no audience there. But every one of these events would benefit by having a professional presenter as a moderator, as a host, as an interviewer, to help keep the flow and the energy going. And you need people who know how to look at a camera and imagine that there's a bunch of people on the other side who are all nodding and smiling. So, you know, that's very important for us right now. I don't know if you saw, there's a comment in the chat about the danger of moving forward. The value of the traditional production company is going to be diminished because everybody thinks they're a producer, and comparing us to, you know, we're like every in-house assistant became an event planner. And I just want to speak to that for a moment, because that is absolutely true, and it has been absolutely true forever. There's nothing new about that. It is an exciting time, and it's a scary time because we are changing, and roles and value are being redefined. And you're right, a lot of your customers are going to go out there and hire the first person who convinces them they know what they're doing. And there's going to be some disasters. There's already been some really disastrous online events. And people are going to hire people who aren't professional enough. So as long as you are professional, and here's the caveat, and you know how to market yourself, okay, you're going to do fine, because all those other people are out there creating market for you. Right?
No, that is true. And I love, and I didn't see who it was. I just brought up the chat. I was only looking at the questions. I think the reality is you should never do in our industry what you're not qualified to do. I was asked to speak at a very large industry of, well, it was a provider. It was a hotel property to about 3,000 people. And they said, what's the most important thing you'd want us to hear? And this is back in the invention of intelligent moving lighting. I said, please don't sell what you don't understand. Bring in someone who can. So if you don't know what you're doing and you're not comfortable in this space, you should not be in this space. But do you have a skill set that applies to the space that we need, to the conversation that we need to have? I had a client literally a week ago. We're doing a West Coast event at a studio in LA. It involves an NBA coach. It involves a whole lot of different people. And the question was, Allin, can you find us some entertainment? I was like, what entertainment are you looking for? They're like, we're looking for somebody really funny to be a comedian to help with this new client project. I'm like, absolutely. And so now we're looking for that. And a lot of comedians haven't done virtual stuff, but a lot of them are starting to do it. And the good ones are going to excel. The good ones are going to get hired. It's just like it was 20 years ago when we started bringing in new technology and new solutions. People are looking for solutions now, not the problems. And I think our industry has to come up with some solutions.
Agreed.
Yeah, so let's take a look at another question here, Tom, just because I see some great ones coming in. For the people that are going to make it, for that percentage, I think it was 63% who anticipate being here next year doing what they're doing, what's going to happen to pricing? And the question's really in contrast. For example, restaurants are now more expensive than they were before. Is that going to translate to our industry, or is that not what we should hope for?
Right. Well, let's reframe the question, because that's a 6-month-old question. 6 months ago, restaurants were asking how they're going to survive because they couldn't imagine a business that was 70% takeout. Right? They're a dining room business. And it didn't occur to them that they could charge a different price for takeout than they could for in-room dining. So there's different pricing models out there because you were actually doing something different. So pricing, we were talking back in April, in early May, that, oh, if the event industry doesn't come back until August or September, will my pricing survive, or is it going to be a race to the bottom because there's so much supply and not enough demand? And the fact is, well, one, that hasn't happened because we're still on hiatus. And two, I think the pricing is actually going to increase if we ever go back to that business. But here's the thing, we're not going back to that business, okay? The streaming world is a completely different business. And there are a couple of comments in here, and there's some stuff in the chat about, you know, how much work virtual and hybrid events are and how low the pricing is. And I'm going, well, you've got two things wrong. The work is whatever the work needs to be, and you can always make the work easier by understanding how to do it. And clearly you don't understand how to price it.
Yep.
And part of pricing is knowing how to sell it, right? Just look at it this way. If somebody was producing a 500-person association paid expo event that people paid and flew in and attend to, and they decide to move it online, what do you think their attendance is going to be? Well, if it's a 5,000 member association, their attendance just went to 2,500 because that's 2,000 people who don't have to pay for travel. All right, so there's a huge value proposition in streaming events that is worth a lot of money, and those event budgets are pretty much the same because they're not paying for food and beverage. Instead, they're going to pay for production value and quality and attendee experience to get the same results. So don't sell the way you always sold because you're not selling the same thing.
Yeah, and I do think it's like it's always been in our industry. There's clients that are willing to spend a lot, and there are clients that are willing to spend very little. I know we had a client that we were on out of New York. They normally spent between $2,000 and $3,000 per person. They were asking us how to do a 3-day event for $100 a person. And my question back to them was, why are your people worth so much less now? Like, is it just the perception that we're going to do a glorified Zoom? I mean, we're putting 800 people all the way across the world in many different time zones on a very important strategic approach to how do you increase your revenue, and yet you're trying to spend what's $100 out of $2,000 to $3,000? I mean, that's 5%.
Right.
And it was an important conversation because they've got to realize, and I can see some of the questions here. They talk about it's 1/10 of the revenue. That's not always true. We had a client that we went from a typical event we did, a 6-figure event. It doubled in revenue, and it doubled for a couple of reasons. One, we had to shoot 163 videos in 4 days. Then we had to create 11,000 customized, individualized animations for recognition with 3 characteristics, and that client doubled. So I don't think it's the same across the industry. I think a little bit of it is, who are you selling to? Why are you selling to them? What is the value that you bring? And then how do you charge for that? And granted, you're not having big union calls that are $20,000, $40,000. You're having a team of 7 that is sitting in a studio. We find 7's about the minimum that we can do an event with, a virtual event with. So I think it's really a lot about who you're selling to and what your pricing or your value prop is. What advice would you give to someone, Tom, who's trying to decide, should I jump into the virtual scape, and can it be profitable, and what will the revenue do next year?
Well, sure, anybody can jump into the virtual scape, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to be good at it, have the right skill sets, know how to assemble a team. The better question is, who are my customers? Okay, who can I sell to? Because at the end of the day, we're all in sales. Okay? We can't do streaming events if we don't sell a streaming event. And who would buy a streaming event from you? Who would buy anything from you? Now, can you develop a product or service that customer would buy? I'm doing a workshop series right now for people rebuilding their sales pipeline. And the first thing I tell them to do is forget about every product that they have and just set them aside, because none of that matters right now. The first thing we're going to do is figure out who you can sell to. Then we're going to build a brand behind it. Then we're going to look at what your value proposition is. And then we're going to design the products that will fit your channel so that you can move on. So if you're thinking first about what to sell and not thinking about who to sell it to, you've got the formula backwards. So you can't jump up and say, if you've got a list of customers that are coming to you saying, we want you to do this for us, then I recommend that you develop the product.
Yeah, no, that's true. And a dear friend of mine and many online today, Sally Webb, from the special event company, just made the comment and said, how do we figure out how to do virtual entertainment? And whoever can figure that out really well is going to score big time. And I can see that Jeff wrote back that they figured out some things. So if you're looking for virtual entertainment, I'll be shooting a call out to Jeff, or Jeff, maybe we can connect a little bit later and talk about that. But I want to switch gears now from this conversation, if I can, Tom, with some more questions that I'm seeing pop over here. And that's for the people that are continuing in their job, in their role, or they're trying to learn better what they can do in the future. What should their education look like? I mean, this is no longer go to this conference, go to that conference. A lot of them have changed, but what do you recommend for someone that wants to be prepared for 2021 or prepare their staff for 2021 from an educational standpoint?
Well, you can go to this conference and go to that conference because they've all moved online. So you actually have the opportunity to consume a lot more of that information if you will make the time for it and make it a priority. The typical objection I get to that is, I don't have time to do that. I'm too busy saving my business. I'm too busy overproducing this streaming event that I undersold. So yeah, you're going to have to make time. Time is a priority. Okay? You will make the time that you need to make to educate yourself and be well versed in what it is that you are trying to do. You can't not do that. One of the questions I get from business owners who still have, a chunk of their team left, particularly larger companies, is, we're all on furlough, kind of on half furlough. We're working half weeks, and I can't get my executives to focus on anything. They're not bringing me ideas to the table. They're just kind of collecting the paycheck and, knocking back anything that comes over their desk, but they're not figuring out how to innovate, come up with new ideas, or help us become better at anything. As an owner, it is your job to give them that motivation, okay? Because the resources are out there, and it doesn't take long to find them and find credible people that you will trust and listen to learn more about whatever it is that you're interested in. And let's face it, we're all online. We've always been here, and now, well, we're all living online. This is the time to figure it out. So for each of your team members, they don't have to study the same thing that you're studying. Yep. They need to study appropriate to their level. If you got a technician, they need to study how to do, vMix and OBS, okay? And this one needs to study how to work with servers, and this one needs to study how to build web platforms, right? Everybody needs to learn their skill set in this new environment.
And I think there's also where the ALEA community can really make a difference is you can cheat a lot of education if you have great friends who you can call and ask the right question to. I know I sat on a group of, it was about 37 of us or so, 27 of us from around the world, starting in March, and we did check-in calls constantly from an industry leadership standpoint. And I was pinging those people in the chat, hey, how are you doing this? What's a new platform? Anybody know about this? One of my questions, does anybody know a great virtual MC? So who can you find right now? Like, everybody just pull out a sheet of paper. Who are the 5 people that you've never had a conversation with, that you've met or you've heard about? Because they may have time right now to take a phone call. I know that I spent 2 hours with one of our competitors, just simply because the circumstances were such where I was like, hey, could we catch up with each other? And we had a conversation unlike we've had in 10 years of passing each other in the RFP lane or in the sharing freelancers. And I learned so much in that conversation. It was really, really valuable. So there are resources out there. There are people that will take your questions and have hard conversations when you're ready to have them. And you can learn it. And some of those, one of the questions, Tom, that just came up here is, other than analyzing cash flow for a brick and mortar type company, what advice would you give on the go or no go for some companies? There is only so much opportunity for event decor in the virtual realm. Is it closed now? And I assume hibernate and then reopen later, but that's a real question. Not everybody wants to get into the virtual space, and not everybody is in the
well.
right
And
place.
I will tell you, and I mean, I feel the pain in the question, because there's a lot of emotion in between the words. There is a lot of work available for decor in the virtual realm. Just look at virtual meetings and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody like Allin, who's probably got 4 or 5 virtual spaces in his building, needs decor. Every corporation that is trying to put on an event with 60 presenters spread all over North America or all over the world, they all need decor. There's a lot of things that can be done out there. What we have to change, what we have to pivot is our mindset, is that our decor business is localized, regionalized, and personally delivered. There's a model out there where your expertise applies. And it could be as simple as building kits, fabricating little packages that can be shipped out one way. They don't have to come back. There's so many things that you can do to help this space. It may not be what you're passionate about. It may not be what you've always done, but the opportunity is absolutely there for the people who want to innovate and put the energy into it, and let the other person decide that that's too hard or that's not fun, or they want to hibernate. And I want to talk about hibernating here for a minute.
Sure.
Okay. Here's what hibernate means right now. If you decide to hibernate for 6 months because you think that's when the business will come back, or 12 or even 18 months, what's going to happen in those 18 months? Every competitor that you have that stays in the business and stays focused is going to be building market share and gaining customers and doing events for them, building trust and credibility. Okay. And all those people, all the people that you're used to doing business will be gone. You will be coming back and starting from zero. Okay. Everybody else is going to have the market share and they will have earned it. So hibernating is, you may as well just shut down because there's nothing to come back to. You're not going to be relevant anymore.
Tom, there are folks, so let's poke this one in the eye though. There are folks out there that I have spoken to, especially really hard situations. They just took delivery of $1 million worth of product March 15th. So carrying that cash flow burden is almost not survivable. There's another great friend who took delivery of a huge building. So they just moved into a giant building. So there is a place where I think there's a real struggle in the industry. And I just want to just recognize my personal opinion is I think we're going to see a significant number. And by significant, I think that's 25 to 35% of businesses that as much as the owner is going to work hard, as much as they want to make it, the burden is too great. It's too hard to carry where they are right now. And if they had known 6 months ago that it was going to last 6 months, maybe they would have done some things differently, but they are where they are right now. What would you say, Tom?
Well, I'm going to help them redo the math, because I've had every one of the conversations that you've just described. They just took delivery of $1 million worth of product. They just bought a new building for $4 million. Okay. Those are all sunk costs.
Yep.
Okay. That's just business. You did it. It didn't work out. You got to move on. Everything that we're dealing with now in terms of business is from where we are today going forward. The past doesn't matter. If you're saddled with debt, what can you do to reduce that debt? Well, if you own a building, you sell the building. If you owe $4 million on the building, and because the market's poor, you sell it for 3.5, you only have 500,000 in debt instead of 4 million in debt. All right, you just picked up $3.5 million. If you just bought $1 million worth of LED wall and you have to turn around and sell it for 600,000 and liquidate it, you're now $400,000 in debt instead of $1 million in debt. It's much easier to survive, and those are just decisions of the past. Okay, if you look at all the bad decisions you've made over your career, the number is actually astronomical. Don't do it. But my point is you have to look, where are you, do the balance on your assets. What is this worth? I need to liquidate it. I need to get out of this decision. I need to take the hit. I need to take the loss, and I need to move forward. And that will extend your runway. That will give you life. Okay. I can't help you get over the disappointment except to say it will fade.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And if you've got a question that you want to go ahead and ask, I can see the questions coming in and folks are voting them up and such like that. We're going to keep getting to them. We just want to recognize that some of you are not going to be able to continue, and the go or no to go decision could be related to financial. It could be related to legal, Tom. There could be people truly in a situation where they're not paying their bills, their legal bills are mounting. Perhaps there are other people that their staff is left. Their staff was furloughed, or they were let go. They can't get them back. They don't know how to get back on top of the wagon. I think there's lots of situations where I just want people to know they're not alone in the struggle, that others are facing this challenge too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not alone. You know, I have conversations about bankruptcy every week, and I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not giving you CPA advice. I'm not giving you HR advice, because I don't have enough letters after my name to do that. But I will tell you, most of that can be avoided. You just might not be comfortable with the choices yet. And so it's important to get out of your bubble, have conversations with people who can help you through this decision-making process. Make sure that you've looked at all of your options, or reconsidered things that you thought might be viable, but then you set them aside because they could well be viable. There's a lot of things that you can probably still do, but at the end of the day, if you've lost your passion, you know, you're out of resources, and the best thing to do is walk away. Then get somebody to validate that decision for you and help you move along faster. The faster you get there, wherever you're going, the faster you get there, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, and I think there's things you can do when somebody else talks to you about it. I know for us, we had a brand new, well, it wasn't brand new, it was a couple of years old, $100,000 truck, and we hadn't put 10 miles on that truck in 6 months, and we were going to sell one of our older trucks. And I think you and I actually talked about it. It's like,
Yeah.
get rid of the really big expensive truck because Amazon's looking for truck delivery. A company drove from Tennessee to North Carolina to Raleigh to buy our $50,000 truck. We applied it against loans. So our loans by the end of this year will be less than $30,000 with the bank, because that's a little bit of finding that freedom just to reduce our debt, recognizing that freedom of choice, which is really what you're getting at, is you can make a choice and you have the freedom to make your choice. And there are some constraints that you need to figure out how to shake loose.
Yeah.
So I applaud that. Hey, another question that's been voted up here, Tom, is what do you see as the revenue opportunities for free virtual content? Is it sponsorship? Is it what are options there? That's a really interesting question. I haven't been asked by anyone.
What are there revenue opportunities for free virtual content? Well, the only way to monetize free is for somebody else to pay for it. Sponsors, if it's a sponsorship in our industry, right now our sponsors aren't ponying up any money. In the audiovisual industry, manufacturers don't have any money for you. I'm sure in the decor industry, there's no money. I mean, let's face it, there's nothing going on for them to spend on. In other industries, in your clients' industries, there are opportunities to help them create monetization of sponsors in that environment. Our responsibility as event professionals is to protect the attendee experience. So I would encourage you to find ways to not mess up the attendee experience for the sake of a sponsor's money. But sponsors have been very gracious, the few that I have dealt with, about having a very background role in free events and being a sponsor of useful free information or experiences for audiences. So yes, what would you do in that? Managing sponsors as a revenue stream, securing sponsors as a revenue stream, and then giving life to the event after it happens live is another potential revenue stream. So there's a lot of different ways to look at monetizing that. But first and foremost is just be prepared to create space for sponsors.
Yeah, and it's probably not the traditional sponsorships that we've worked with. I do know that there are clients looking for expert advice and direction on how do they get to their market, how do they get to their consumers, or how do they get to their audiences, whether it's in the virtual space or the virtual reality space, or we're playing with a product where essentially everybody has freedom to go and meet with whoever they want to, because we know that people are tired of the Zoom, the 4x4, the 2x2, the Brady Bunch experience. They want the ability to choose who they talk to using proximity sound as a solution for those of you that are on the technology side. The closer I get to somebody, the more I can talk to them. The further away, the more that they fade. So I think there is an opportunity for creative. And you can imagine years ago when the internet was invented and somebody first said, hey, should we have Zoom or should we have conversations like this? Could you imagine if you bought stock a year ago in Zoom? Nobody would have done that. What's the thing right now that we can come up with as an industry, or really as individual companies or practitioners? What's the thing that your customer needs? Let's zero in and try to figure out that question. So shifting gears now, I'm seeing lots of stuff come up, interesting enough, about partnerships have never been more important than they are right now. Allin, could you speak, and you have to forgive me folks, I'm bouncing between lots of screens here. Allin, could you speak more about the conversation you had with your competitor? Yes, I've had more conversations with my competitors in the last 6 months, really probably April and May, I started having the conversations, and I loved every one of them. All of these insecurities and the fears of what should we tell them, what should we not tell them. I had a conversation last night with a friend, and I said, hey, you've got some freelance resources. I'm going to hire them through you, but would you be open with them hiring and doing different work? And there's just such a sense that we're more competitive than we need to be. We're better together than we are separate. We have our secret sauce. Like, what is your secret sauce? You probably don't need to give that away entirely, but I'll tell you what, my conversations were, how are you guys doing? What are you doing with your staffing? Do you see pay cuts coming up? what percentage. I mean, this was like the greatest thing in the world because we're sharing openly. I've cut 40% of my staff. What percentage have you cut? When are you going to cut your next staff? I was blown away, Tom and friends, at how open everybody was, because you never want to let a tragic event like this go to waste when you have a chance to have a more intimate and purposeful conversation with people that can help you. And so they would look at me and say, I think you need to cut some more, or how are you going to handle this? It was great. Finances, I've heard of lots of friends that have seen their interest rates double on some of their float accounts. And I was shocked by that. So I'm learning ahead of time because people are willing to have the conversation. So to our friend Sarah, who shot that question out there, I would just encourage you, Sarah, to make a list of 5 questions you want to ask, and then either see if they're open to meeting at an appropriate restaurant or see if they're open to just doing a phone call. I have said no to anyone. I've said yes to all the folks that I've talked with, especially the closest competitors that I never knew. And now I understand why they're so good at what they do. And I think we'll take better care of each other because of that. So I hope that answers your question. So Sarah, your job's come up with 5 questions that you want to ask a competitor, and I would come up with probably 3 competitors that you'd like to approach, because you're probably not as competitive as you think you are. So I hope that answers that question from our friends out there. We got a little bit of time left here. Tom, what are your thoughts on expenses to pivot? If we have a great idea to bring something new to the market, but it takes money to become reality, do you invest the money or hold on to what's left of your cash? In other words, how do you measure the risk versus the expense in COVID?
That's a great question, because you're weighing your chances on something. It's a strategic question. A pivot is a business plan. Okay, so you do the traditional research to see whether it's viable. How much startup money is it going to take? How long is it going to take to generate revenue? What are my expenses going to be along the way? And you do the math. Is it going to be a good investment for you? Then I would say yes, do it, because that is different than sustaining the business that you have, okay, which may or may not be valuable. And matter of fact, sometimes if we're really good at pivoting, if we pick a pivot that is strategically complementary, I'm actually going to allay some of my costs for my heritage business and move that over to my pivot, which has a better chance of being successful. So yes, cash is king, preserve cash, but you still have to get to be an entrepreneur and decide where you're going to take risks so that you can grow out of it. We talked about this in my webinars: survive, stabilize, and thrive. Now, you get through that survive stage where you make all the adjustments or most of the adjustments you need to make, then you stabilize your business so you can operate month to month. Now it's time to get back to thriving again. What are you going to grow your business into? Because as we've talked about, waiting for good times to come back isn't a business plan. So yeah, if you've got a good pivot and it makes good business sense, that's a good use for your cash.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do think there's opportunity. I think there's people that have money that they're trying to figure out where to invest it, but it's difficult to get any money from the banks, from the traditional investment models, because folks are just really waiting to see what comes up. We've got an election around the corner. We've got 2021. We've got the financial impact of all the different loans and things like that. So as we kind of get a little bit close to the end of our time, I want to make sure we get a couple more questions in here. We've got a friend that's asking us questions. What professional roles should a business owner have in close contact as they analyze go or no go for the future of the business? Yeah. So Tom, how would you answer that question? Who should you have around you that can coach you in that situation if you're really at a struggle point right now?
Woo, that's a tough one, because my personal experience with financial analysts and bankruptcy lawyers and even business coaches is they're not very good in these situations. I find that CPAs are not great in these situations. But if I had to start with anybody, I would probably start with a business coach, and maybe it's because that is my bias, because that is part of what I do. But I would actually talk to other business owners, going back to the earlier question, and I would start there. You'd be surprised the opportunities that will come out of that and the insight that will come out of it. Do a little bit of community soul searching. I know that's difficult to be vulnerable and talk about these things, but let's face it, we're all in this together. Right now, none of us looks really good. We all have our pre-coffee faces on. So go out and reach out to other people who are in your position and say, what are you looking at? Here are the questions I have. Have you thought about this? Do you have any insight? You need some unbiased, unemotional assessment that you can consider. And there are people who are too close to your business to help you, and there are people who are too far away from your business to help you. Find that happy medium for people who can be informed but objective.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and throw out, I think I disagree with you just a little bit on this one. I know towards the tail end of March, my first call was to my CPA, who I've had for about 20 years. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Calling your attorney is never a bad idea. If you really feel like you're approaching the bankruptcy spot, you want to make that call way earlier and not last minute. Sitting down with your leadership team, we have a leadership team of 5 at Creative Visions, and I sat down and put side by side, here's our year-to-date revenue, here's our year-to-date budget, and when I extrapolate that to the end of the year, this is the number I think we need to raise, and this is the amount we need to cut. And boy, I was getting fantastic advice.
If you've extrapolated the emotional decision and you've made the business decision that this is your best course of action, then absolutely, my first call is going to be to the attorney. Because I will have already been talking to my CPA just to get to that decision. I'm really speaking to that whole soul searching side of it. Is, a no or no go decision is really emotional. There's nothing that forces you into bankruptcy unless creditors insist upon it, and they're not going to get any money out of you anyway. So there's no advantage for creditors to put small businesses in bankruptcy. Okay, that's a television thing. That's a big company thing. Okay? It doesn't happen to folks like us. So figure out the emotions of it first, and what are you willing to do, and have you tried everything? And then there are some very simple legal steps that you can take if you decide to go that route.
Yeah, and I think looking for an advisory team, I think people care more than they care now. They care more now than they cared before. So if you reach out to the right person, our banker, I'll just share with this. We called him up and I just said, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we're doing. This is where I see some bumps. We would love some help in terms of some relief in terms of mortgage, or he offered interest only on some of the equipment loans. We chose to keep paying interest as we did our cash assessment. We wanted to keep paying down those notes because I didn't want them to ricochet on me next year. So I just really encourage people to get creative, be in relationship. I think that's the most important thing that you can do. So I want to be mindful of our time. I know Lisa's just about to pop back up on here. Lisa, is there anything else that you want to make sure? Why don't you hold us on the spot? You tell us what we missed.
Well, that was what I was hoping, how I was hoping the conversation would go. First of all, I'm so grateful to everyone that showed up today, chose to show up. You put yourselves in the driver's seat by not only being on this webinar, but interacting in the chat the way you have. I think there's so much for professionals to learn by coming and being a part of webinars that ILEA and other organizations host, but also communicating amongst yourselves. Like you made that point a couple times, Allin. So this community really is super powerful. So yeah, big thank you to both of you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. But before we go, I want to go ahead and put Tom on the spot. Tom, I want to ask you, what would you be willing to do or open to, because I know you're a very generous guy, what would you be willing to do for the ILEA members that might like to have a conversation with you? Just maybe there's something you could offer there.
Okay, 2 things. So somebody in the chat asked about where my webinars are that we've been referring to. So with everybody's permission, I just posted intentionalsuccess.biz, which is my online community where those are hosted. They're called the show will go on webinars. So you're welcome to go back and watch them there. They're very informative. But the offer that I would like to make to ILEA members is the same offer that I made to my audience back in March and April. If you need some time, you need somebody to help to process your situation, if you need a business coach or advisor to help you figure out what to do next and your particular circumstances, I'm offering my time for that. And Lisa and the team will send out, Alexandra will send out a link to schedule a call with me. and we'll sit down, have a quick Zoom call, tell me about your situation, and I'll share some advice that has worked for other folks and to help you move on to that next thing. It's no obligation. I'm not there to sell you anything. I just want to get you over the hump so you can get on to the next thing and get focused back on your business again. So I'd love to do that for you.
Well, thank you, Tom. And I can just share with everybody that 15 minutes with Tom, where you just bullet them the questions, there is not a secret sales pitch that comes up at the end. I've caught up and said, hey, we're getting ready to do this ad campaign. What do you recommend? I sent him just the other day an email for a campaign that was going out. I said, Tom, give me some criticism, or what do you think we should do? And he wrote back some great things, super helpful. And I just want to share right before I jump off here, Lisa, is, this past week I was in a devotional from the book Emotional Healthy Spirituality, and this quote came up that just jumped out at me in life. It says, journeys involve movement and action, stops and starts, detours, delays, and trips into the unknown. And I really feel like that's where a lot of us are right now. But this is just a journey. This is not our identity. And I just hope everybody knows that we're with you along the way. And I look forward to a brighter time. And I think next year is going to be a year of high demand, because I think there's going to be tremendous pent-up energy and pent-up demand. And I'm looking forward to being a part of it with many of you.
Aw, wonderful words. Thank you so much, Allin. And Tom, for your incredibly generous offer. Thank you so much on behalf of the organization.
Yeah,
if you are an ILEA member, this offer is for you as a thank you and a give back to you for being a part of this community. So I dropped my personal business email address in the chat. Please copy and paste it, take it away, send me a note if you'd like to be connected to Tom, and I will help facilitate the introduction. So lisa@brandalive.ca. I promise to reply super quickly and get you going. So Tom, again, thank you for that. And thank you for giving us time and all the preparation I know you put into this. Allin, thank you for really spearheading the idea behind this conversation a month or two ago. We're really grateful to have you as part of the community, and certainly rooting for all of us. Alexandra, thank you for being here. I know a number of our ILEA Board of Governors were on the line as well, so thank you for being here. As always, we couldn't do this without the generous partnership from our friends at the Giants Enterprises. So to the team at the Giants, we're wishing you well, hope you're safe, and thank you so much for enabling us to do content just like this. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Allin and Tom, thanks again. We will be posting this on ILEAHub.com in a day or two, and keep well and be safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Good night.